Hello, dear ones. This is Anthea. Thank you for tuning in to our very first conversation of the Shades of Love podcast series, where we talk about love and call on love to discuss the pressing issues of our time. This is the kind of conversation I think we must have more of. In the spirit of truly listening to each other, we will take a moment of breathing and centering together at the start of each episode. So please sit down with your back up, drop your shoulders, relax, close your eyes, breathe. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. Now listen with your heart. Today's Shade of Love is also the first story of the book 50 Shades of Love. The shade is called Stop. Stop was the love I received in my birth name, Ting, which means stop in Hokkien, for being born a girl in a different time in a different Singapore, to an illustrious land-owning family's eldest son. Yes, my dearest Papa. Thankfully, the Chinese character Ting, which means stop, was masterfully disguised under the phonetically similar Ting, which means virtuous, by my second aunt, who is a Chinese scholar in her own right. The birth of my eldest sister, Si, was celebrated as she was the first grandchild of the family. 2 years later, I was born. Since I was, according to traditional belief, in the way of the family lineage, I was so named to stop the double X chromosomes for the next offspring. Wei dutifully arrived 4 years later, much to Ma's relief. Imagine all that pressure on the poor woman. My beloved brother was aptly conferred the name Wei, meaning greatness, mighty. I later found out that I had it good because some other girls born into the same predicament as I was were given names like Zhao Di, which literally means bring on a younger brother. Studies have shown that the emotions a pregnant woman goes through will directly affect the baby. I sometimes wonder if all that anxious hoping and pleading anticipation Ma had for me to please be a son had shaped my masculine view of the world and how I lived through my 20s and 30s. Wow, this is where it all started. In pairing this shade with a tree, as we do with all the stories, the sole male double coconut plant in the Singapore Botanic Gardens came to mind. The matured female plant succumbed to beetle infestation in 2016. Pending the maturity of several seedlings, it is hoped that at least one of them will turn out to be a female plant, an answer which we'll only know in 15 to 40 years' time. Females are yearned for in this case. I came into this world being told I should stop because I'm a girl. And maybe because life was trying to put the brakes on me that I decided to power ahead with every fall, every rise to prove the world wrong about me being a girl. Maybe this birth name Stop reminds me to be unstoppable in being the best I can be and to serve the best I can. I think there's no force more powerful than a woman determined to rise. But this confidence was certainly mixed with self-doubt. I was not given any less love growing up, but this early psychological imprint definitely played a role in my self-doubt as a female leader who was successful. That classic imposter syndrome. I felt for a long time I wasn't good enough because I was a woman and didn't realize how much this gender bias shaped my sense of self, both through the successes and failures, until my colossal collapse 15 years ago. I'm still unpacking all of that, and in fact, I'm just discovering recently with more inner work about how that all played a part in some of the major decisions I made, including the abortion when I was in my 20s. My first thought of who I would like to have a conversation with on this shade of love, on gender and identity, was of course Corinna Lim. Many know Corinna as a former lawyer and one of Singapore's most prominent women's rights activists for close to 30 years, as well as the current executive director of AWARE, the Association of Women for Action and Research. But most may not know that Corinna is a twin, a former national squash player, and also a Fulbright Scholar. Hello, Corinna.
Hello.
Thank you so much for bravely saying yes to being part of this podcast experiment on love and how we should call on love more, right? To discuss the pressing issues of our time. What was your childhood experience like as a girl? Since you and I were born, into the same era.
I think probably what shaped me most was being a twin.
Right, of course.
Yeah,
that's so interesting.
Because it meant that I always had a companion.
Yeah, and your twin is also a girl, right?
It's also a girl.
Yes.
And when we were young, we looked identical.
Wow.
So people had problems telling us apart.
Mm.
We grow up and then we wonder whether we are in fact twins because we became so different. And that, to me, is a really interesting thing about how the genes that you are born with and how there's someone who has identical genes with you can become so different because of epigenetics, how genes express themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Even though we did have pretty similar upbringings, went to
of
the same
course.
schools.
Right.
And of course my parents treated us quite equally. But we still grew up to be quite different. So a few years ago, we actually did a genetic test because we didn't believe anymore that all these our friends didn't.
So you actually really doubted to the point that you wanted to do a test.
So when 23andMe came up, right, and on our 50th birthday,
right,
when my sister finally relented, I always wanted to do the test. But she said, when I reach 50, then I think I will be okay to determine whether or not there is, another human being that's got exactly the same genes. So friends and family took bets. I bet that we were identical. That was my instinct. My mother really wasn't sure. My mother.
That is so cool. Oh my goodness.
Anyway,
and then the test?
Yes, we're identical. And because we were the first two, my sister and my experience is very different from my younger sister's experience.
Sure.
Who's your age. Who was, and my parents by then wanted a boy too.
Oh,
right? Two girls. This was the age when two is enough.
Yes. Oh, yes, of course.
In fact, I'm wondering how your brother
came out, right?
Came out, because that was like, people were quite...
Obedient and compliant
about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess your parents weren't. my
you
mother
can tell
is like
me clearly not compliant.
Twins are considered one or two, right? Because they wanted to have another one.
That is so clever.
So they're like,
but
is it one or two, right?
That's so clever.
Yeah. So anyway, twins are considered one. So they could have another one. And
no, wait, you were not joking. Like that twins at the time in terms of the policy was considered one.
Yes.
So it goes with your pregnancy, in other words.
I guess so.
I didn't even know that.
Right.
Okay. So, listeners, this is like new to me. Okay. That is so fascinating. What a fun fact, and what a funny policy to start with. All around that. But
of course, that was actually probably the best gender equality campaign that we ever had. Boy or girl, two is enough.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
And very, very open and very overt, right?
Very overt,
yeah,
right?
Very overt.
And then they had a lot
true.
of messages about, how, and I think it was, looking back, some of the old posters, they were brilliant.
That is so true. Actually, now that you brought it up, I remember that very clearly.
Yeah.
Right? And it's true, the boy or girl came first. And that was in the 60s, 70s.
Yes.
So
and you know what was interesting? And they actually read it well. The main poster was two girls. Two very cute girls. And I was
that one I cannot remember. Really.
And I think, that's like me and my sister. Because there was a certain chemistry about it. Right? So I always identified with that poster. But they knew that they shouldn't do one boy, one girl.
Right. Yeah. So very cleverly they were
Very
saying,
clever.
yeah, very clever. Because
Yes.
that's visual
Yes.
suasion almost, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It was brilliant.
Okay, so I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Another fun fact.
Yeah. So I think of it as the only and very good gender equality campaign
Wow.
Singapore's ever done. Right? So,
Yeah.
unintended.
And what happened after? Corinna, what do you say to that?
So gender equality
Yeah.
has never been a primary value in Singapore.
What do you hope to see?
So I think
Yeah.
some of the broad mainstream things would be about care,
Yeah.
and whose role it is to give care, and whose role it is to work. And I mean, of course, nowadays it's both men and women are working, but when one has to sacrifice or the career,
Yeah.
who will do that?
Yeah.
More than the other in terms of
Yeah.
I'll take a back seat and I'll take a slow track and we'll go to another country and because the wife needs to do that in order to further her career. Is that going to happen more? Right. So I think it is going to happen more, but it's a process.
Yeah, it's a process that we must not be intentional about. I think this is what we wanna keep emphasizing, right? You can't just leave it to chance and let things happen as and when they need to happen.
Yeah, what's happened is that it's an asymmetrical move. Women have moved into the workforce way more than men have moved into the homes.
Yes, that's a very say that one more time. It's true. It's very asymmetrical, right?
Yes.
In terms of the shifts.
Yes.
So more women have moved into the workforce than more men moving into
So women then end up
the
doing
home and care,
double, triple shift of work, right? At work and then at home they have to give care, and then now we have parents as well, right, to take care of. So yeah, you will have a lot of like super women because that's what is required. And but yeah, that needs to the shift needs to come more with the men actually. And so in my last SR Nathan lecture, I talked about my dad, right, and how difficult it was in a way for him to relate to his 3 girls. It was awkward.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, oh, these are like, okay, your mom will take care of you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He was a great dad. He really wanted to be close to us. But it was awkward because he was a man and he just had certain ideas about how a man should be.
And the gendered roles are still ingrained in us, right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's
until he was 70. And then those things dissolved.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because he didn't have his work anymore.
Right.
He had been retired for a long time, so he didn't have that identity. He had to search for a new identity. It wasn't easy. And then he found acceptance of death because he had a lot of conditions.
Right.
And he had heart problems from the time he was in his late 40s. But by the time he was like 80, he had, 2 different types of cancers, diabetes, heart, everything. He had a lot. So every day for him was a miracle. He's just happy to be alive.
Wow.
And because he had accepted that, right, then it's like the gender roles didn't matter so much. Right? So, in the past he wouldn't do certain housework, but now it was okay. Right?
That really resonates with me because dad went through the stomach cancer, survived it, right? It was such a major wake-up call for him. Same with what you talked about your dad. He found what truly is who he is, right? He is just one of the most, his grandchildren all say he's the coolest, gong gong, right? And I think he is actually giving to the grandchildren what he didn't really do with us. I mean, again, like your dad, he was a great dad. He was also very present, but it was very clearly gendered until obviously he lost his business during the Black Monday recession that he was at home because he lost, but he was actually doing bringing things like sewing factory gloves and all of that. And I think that was also one big watershed for him. But by and large, I think this is interesting for us to, when we discuss gender. I also want to say that with my dad, right? I definitely, because, and of course this is all completely my conjecture, because I think because I was, from the moment I was born, I was I was told in some, very indirect manner that, you are not a girl, sort of. Dad even said one time that I'm like the son, especially when I got offered honors and all of that, right? But at the same time, I felt like, yeah, there was an expectation. I even asked Mom a few years back whether she was hoping for me to be a boy, and as I read in the story, right, she did. The whole time she was carrying me, she was really praying and pleading that I would be a boy. And I'm not saying that that's why I am, but I felt that expectation almost, right? That and I, in some ways, I kind of lived up to being a son.
Yeah.
And this is no discredit David, my brother, at all, right? Because he's been a wonderful son and all of that, but I was older, so there was a part that I was playing, and I think because of that, and I'm gonna share this, right? I remember when I became a managing director at a very young age, at 25. So the whole drive and determination part of it, I also put it down to just part of what I role model as the male figures around me. So I was definitely, one of those real go-getter and all of that. Very successful, became a managing director at 25. And then I didn't know how to behave, right? I started having self-doubt because in the room there will be all male leaders and
Right.
me. That created a lot of stress as well, actually. I remember of feeling like, will I be outed? It's just so interesting how, a certain expectation that is placed on you. And look, I was obviously born a girl, right? But the expectation I felt was that I was to be that of a boy, a male. And then because of that, I had all this conflict within myself, right? In the financial sector, which I was at, I was constantly asked, and I want to ask you about this, constantly asked whether I felt there was a glass ceiling for women. Right, in the financial services sector and or business sector in general. I remember honestly saying to this reporter then that I didn't feel it, but I don't think I was being honest. I definitely felt like I had to work a lot harder. Right, I don't think I was stopped in any way for achieving where I could go, and I was able to take advantage of those opportunities. But I definitely had to work a lot harder. Has that been your experience?
So to say that, I think in the first 25 years of my life, I was pretty gender blind.
Okay.
Right, and
Wow.
it's interesting because
So
my
different.
family has one man, my father,
Yeah.
3 girls,
Oh, right.
and my mother's very strong. Right, my mother in some ways is more stronger than my dad. My dad's more laid back. And so at home, it was like women ruled. And my younger sister, who actually I think my parents both wanted her to be a boy,
right,
was even more of a tomboy than we were. So she's the one that climbed trees. She's the monkey like you, right? She's the same.
She was me, yeah.
Right, she was you.
Wow,
right.
So interesting.
Actually, in the
expectation,
family, there was it really was a gender blind family, and we never felt any less. And I went to CHIJ,
right,
all girls school.
Yeah,
again,
I went to a
there
girls'
was
school
like,
too.
I mean, there's no problem. We can do everything, and we're expected to do everything and anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Move the furniture, the desk, whatever, right?
Yeah,
and this is like, there's no issue.
Yeah, same.
So it was only when we started work.
Yes.
And in law, women do really well.
Oh,
it's
yay.
a language-based
right.
profession. And women, and I think it's actually very much socialization. They do better in languages. Right? So, and it's the checking and all of that. I mean, so... proofreading,
the thoroughness,
and yes, you see some of these things playing out in even the different types of law. Men will do well in court,
right?
Or they tend to go in that area, and the women will do the corporate law, the negotiations, and then like, oh my god, this is like the 100th time I'm looking at this draft. I couldn't really do it myself. I really don't like that kind of work, but so in law, women did pretty well, but there were gendered gendered departments.
Right.
right?
Preferences, and yes,
yes.
right. And you could see that.
Very clearly.
Oh, wow, it's so interesting.
And then, you in order to be a good litigator, you must like fighting, right? You cannot take it personally. You go in, you give it your best fight, but at the end, whether you win or lose, you can have a drink with the other lawyer.
Right.
So you must be built that way, and
right,
or you must actually be socialized that way.
And talking about socialized, that's actually what I felt too, right? So I was a banker, I was in corporate banking, and because I could drink and smoke, I actually did very well because in corporate banking, in those days, sometimes
you're one of the guys.
I was.
Yeah.
I was one of the guys even in university, to be honest, right? But then I was definitely one of the guys in the corporate world.
Right.
And that actually, I would say, may have helped in so many ways in my meteoric rise.
Yep.
But I remember so vividly, right? And I don't know whether, this old friend of mine will remember this. So I had a fellow colleague who also joined, also young banker. She couldn't drink, right? But part of the expectation was that she had to. And I remember being so appalled because she drank so much with a client on an evening out that she passed out.
Right.
And I remember at the time thinking, this is so bad and so wrong.
Yeah.
And she was in such an unsafe place, and at the time, I remember that was the first time I first noticed how I was different to the other girls, but it didn't go so deep. I didn't do a lot of a deep reflection as I did, for the last 15 years since my colossal collapse, right? But I remember that was my first point of a wake-up call that, so what happens if it's for a girl and they can't drink, does that mean that this is it? Because then the client may not ask her out. Would that mean that, she's not actually going to be able to get the account or, and stuff like that. And I remember that must be one of the first moments for me to see gender difference, gender biases, and gendered roles, right? The roles that we play, and the expectations that come with it. But I remember, even just telling you that, I feel a punch in my gut. Because I remember being, oh my goodness, so many things could have happened to her in that situation. So what do you say about this unconscious gender bias that is still so prevalent, at the workplace?
Yeah.
In terms of how we should show up, and how many times do we then see women sometimes putting themselves in, in precarious situation?
Yeah, I think that's changing. But the idea of what a leader looks like, they were very male qualities.
Yes. Right. Well, yeah.
And only, when
I'm
was
saying,
it that you
I'm
started?
saying it sheepishly, but at the same time, it did serve me when I needed, to be successful.
When did we start hearing like vulnerability?
I know,
right?
Should
be a leadership quality, right? Was it 10 years ago?
I think less.
Less?
I think less. If you think about when Brene Brown really came in, in full force, I think less than 10 years, you're right.
Yeah. So I think not all companies, but with some of the more international companies, because you need the best talent.
Yeah.
So some of these ideas, vulnerability, being empathetic, right, have now become leadership qualities.
Yes.
So I think it's less daunting generally as a environment, right?
Now,
now.
But harassment at workplace would that still be something that we should look at from a gender lens still?
Oh, we should look at everything with a gender lens. We should,
this
right?
Is why she's Corinna Lim. We should look at everything with gender lens. I love that. No, we should. We should
not be gender blind.
Yes.
We have to actually be gender sensitive.
Yes.
If we are, it's because we are gender blind that we have so few senior female leaders.
Yes.
Right, and there's of course the society also is, if the home expects it is the women's role to be the caregiver, then that will also impact how far they can go.
Yeah.
And so nowadays, I think we actually should look at men. So when we keep thinking, gender equality, we have to work on the women, it's like, no, we actually really have to work on both equally. If not, in fact, I would say we should work on men more, because we just haven't been focusing on them at all for
I
so
am
many
so
years.
with you. I'm so glad that you raised this, because I was actually gonna, bring this up. Right? Because very often this whole gender equality conversation tends to focus on women. I mean, and that is important, obviously, because we want to, because there are women who also have a unconscious bias about themselves, like I did.
Oh no, there are
right?
disadvantages.
So that's
Still,
disadvantages.
there is.
So there is
yes.
also the gender equity that also comes in, right? Because of course there is still that disadvantages, and but historically and socially right, that women still have to contend with. But I really think that what you said is so important, that this is not just about us focusing on women. In fact, I'm with you. I think we should actually focus on men more if we do want gender equality as a fundamental value of our society.
Yeah.
But you are absolutely right. I think because now we have the opportunities for both men and women to live fulfilled lives. Therefore, if we do, want to still see, families, then the conversation also has to be very different. And you talked about care, right?
Yeah.
Which you mentioned, and I think that's a big part of. I wanted to ask you about, what do you think about the role of women, though? Because how much do you think is also our own doing, in terms of women holding women back? And I say this because, I feel like often women also tend to judge confident and successful women more harshly, right? Perhaps because of the legacy of patriarchy and our own values as a society, right? Because right now it's not that. So what do you say of that?
I get asked this a lot, and I'm like, why is it that it's always the women that we think are more of the problem, or we want to say, hey, look, it's also
in the equation,
your fault, right? That you're holding other women back. I think it's a system, so I don't actually look at it as women holding women back. I just think that's the way the system is. That is the way that the cultural and national beliefs and ideas and values are. And maybe people expect that women will be different somehow, because they are the ones that are complaining about not being able to progress in certain ways.
Right.
So they're like, oh, but you yourself are guilty of this. So I feel like that argument is about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I never actually, and I've not seen women be meaner to women, and I've been in people say, oh, you mean you can work in an all women environment, because that's what aware is. It's mostly women, and now and then we might have some male staff or male volunteers for sure, and sometimes male interns. I'm like, that's how we get so much shit done. Because actually the team works really well, right? Generally, I'm like, and people are like very surprised. I'm like, really? This is so hard to imagine this, because I have been in the convent, and in a way, it's just been all women, and it's very, very functional and productive and efficient, and loving. I mean, it's got a really nice.
But that narrative, I must say, it's also very much coming from a society that's very patriarchal.
Yeah.
Right? Because we say that, you will hear often about how women is being judged if they come together and do work together, right? So I have the same experience with you, right? I think that's, well, personally, I have not had challenges working in an all women environment. I would say that with the male, and like I said, going back to the history that I've had, right? It's just, I actually feel uneasy, when there are males around, because of the history that I had of being so worried about, being outed, or, that whole sense of, am I meant to be here, right? Since I don't see many other women, right? Remember that this is going back when I was such a young person, and in a different time now, where you really I did not see many female leaders at all. So that I think is a really interesting take that you just made about how we also need to just break this thing about whether it's all the same gender environment doesn't mean that there's always going to be some, gendered bias, or some challenge that is it's actually focused on that gender only, right? What do you think about some people saying that, women can't have it all?
Can men?
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
no one can have it all. I mean, I would, love to be able to have time to do some other thing. And I'm like, hey, I can't have it. No one can have it all. Even me without kids, right? And just like having very, very specific goals in life. I can't have it all.
Yeah,
so,
same.
but yeah, when people say that, I'm like, so can men? So yeah, I think
Good
that
comeback.
when they say that, it's like this thing about, I suppose, trying to counter this idea when women want to do well at work as well.
Yeah.
And then they're also mothers.
Yeah.
Then they're like, hey, I mean, don't expect.
I'm
everything.
actually asking you this because I've actually heard a lot of people asking women this.
Right.
Right. And I feel like it's important for us to put it out there. And you're right. Right. Why is it only us of women?
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely spot on. Because can men? But no one really go ask a man this question. I certainly haven't come across, but women, I've heard so much, including my own friends who've also been asked that.
The men who can have it all is because they don't really care for perhaps family, right? They're not so active as fathers. That is changing. But if all you need to do is focus on your career, then you might think that yes,
you can have it all.
Yeah. Right. So, but really, when I think about this, I think about my dad at 60 when he had no more work, and then what did he have left? His friends were his work friends.
Yep.
And that's why he had nothing. And the achievements, his company moved on. He's forgotten. Right. So I think to have to live with that. Right.
Yeah. In fact, I will also argue the other flip side of it, right? Like boys being encouraged to lead and demonstrate self-confidence and from young without expressing emotions, right? I feel that's also a big reason for the state of mental health, in our young. And I'm saying this because we have actually statistics to say that men are 2.5 times more likely to take their own lives.
Yes.
In Singapore.
Yep.
And our teenage boys' suicides have gone to record high levels.
Right.
Right. So I think that's also this need to look at, this men don't cry or boys don't cry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to also change that. So I really like what you said about, if I was going to do a wrap up, this is what I think is important. How about we in the gender equality conversation actually put more emphasis and resources, to with
but
the men.
It has to be men leading that conversation.
Yes, of course.
Right. And this is where
is that a challenge? Is that
yes,
right now a challenge?
There is.
Yeah. Because
how many men do you know that want to lead this conversation? Right, and then when a woman leads
out there, that's your challenge. That's your
when
challenge.
the women want to lead, they can't. They're not going to be accepted. Like
of course,
if you say anything about men.
Yeah.
So men have to lead this, but the young men are changing.
I think so too. Yes.
2 guys approached me a few days ago, and they have a mental health app that they want to do. I'm like, oh my gosh, because they've gone through therapy, and I'm like, this is so refreshing. And so men are beginning to actually seek help when they need, and I see the softer side, right? They're not so like all about men. Boys don't cry.
Yeah, I know. What about the role of fathers?
Fatherhood,
yes,
is to me is one of those pathways to gender equality.
Yes,
to healthy masculinity.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
So if there's one thing I would love to promote is healthy, active fathers and healthy masculinity.
Yeah, role modeling the healthy masculinity.
Yes.
Not just to their sons, but also to in the way they actually treat the daughters and treat the mother of his children. Actually, that role modeling would be a major part of this gender equality that we're moving towards.
Yeah, and the other idea that I would love to see the end of is boys will be boys. Right, as if we expect so little of boys, they're just going to be badly behaved and commit all these of misdemeanors. But that shouldn't be. right?
Yeah.
So I think if we can work on these two, we would be able to promote gender equality, reduce sexual assault, and all these misdemeanors and offenses.
So you don't think that in the work that we are doing for gender equalities, gender equity needs to be talked about in the same breath?
So I actually treat both synonymously.
Okay.
So I don't
All right.
actually make
You don't
distinction.
make a
I just
distinction?
that gender equality, I suppose, is just something that people are more used to.
Right.
But I don't mean equality.
Yeah.
Like, you
I
have
think it's
to
important to
yeah.
make that distinction. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me what it's, you don't mean equality is that okay, we
like
want
50-50 everything.
Yeah, or men
We're talking about
men becoming women or
opportunities.
women becoming men. Yeah, not at all.
We're talking about equal opportunities for all.
Mm.
We're talking about recognizing also that women and men's experiences are different. There might be accommodation that we need to make
Correct.
to accommodate those differences, right, for men and for women.
And that in itself is equity, because it's not just about the equal opportunities,
Yes.
it's also the equal conditions. It's what you said, right? The
Yes.
starting point.
Yeah, equal access to those opportunities must be there.
Yeah. So okay, that's important to get that clarification. But there is a distinction, although we don't have to always use the two terms separately, as long as we know.
I only use gender equality because it's the more common term.
Okay.
Right?
Okay,
but it
great.
means equity, right?
Okay.
It's that not so many people talk about equity.
Yes, not at all. Yeah, and many people are confused actually between the two terms. So I want to come back to this thing, this concept of toxic masculinity, right? You mentioned earlier that you addressed that in that lecture.
I addressed masculinity, and then I also pointed out something called toxic masculinity, which some people misunderstand as me saying that masculinity and men are toxic. And of course, so this is not just in Singapore that there is this misunderstanding. This is also a global misunderstanding, right? So this is not the idea. The idea is that there are some things that are masculine norms, right? And in fact, masculine norms are more tightly policed. Men are expected. You never see a man wear a dress.
Right.
Cannot.
Right.
Cannot wear makeup. Cannot wear a dress. Cannot, be effeminate in their mannerisms. And girls can get away with all this. We can wear pants. We can be tomboys, right? It is much harder for men. So the norms that men have are policed much more. So that's one. Two is that there are some norms that are not so healthy. And you talked about this, that boys cannot cry. And if that human beings, are not allowed to cry, why would we have tear ducts? So so this is not a healthy norm, right? This idea that you cannot cry. And when you have to keep suppressing this from boyhood to manhood, how do you, that does things to your system and who you are, right? So these are some things that are not healthy. And these are what people call toxic masculinity. The fact that you can only be a man in such restricted ways, that's number one. And number two, that some of these norms are in themselves not healthy.
Right.
So in the past, there used to be norms of men must have power over women.
Right.
Men must have power over other men. Men must be, in some ways, resort to violence. These ideas, they're not exactly what we call healthy.
Right. And that's what you referred to as toxic masculinity. Yes. Now, because it's not so immediately obvious, I think both to men and women, but especially to men, right? And to, I think, to young boys, how do we get men, boys and men, to know this difference between masculinity and toxic masculinity?
No, so we just think about which norms are what we call unhealthy norms, right? So parents should not should not say to their boys don't cry, stop crying.
Or boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. So these are just some of the things that you just try to stop doing, right? Just be conscious of this. Some norms there are so some of the more normal neutral norms, men as protectors,
right,
and men as providers.
Yeah,
Okay,
men as
now men
providers.
as providers, right? I
Yeah.
mean, in today's world, you don't want to really promote that idea so much. Men as, what about men as, the tender side of that,
Yeah.
strong man? But why
Yeah.
don't we promote that, right? It's still strong,
Yeah.
right? But it shows like, okay, I can be strong in this way that is caring for my children, or whatever it is that you are actually.
You just reminded me of Gandhi's quote that says, "Only the gentle is ever strong."
Yeah.
Only the gentle.
Yes, so we need
is
to
ever strong.
use some of these ideas and cast them in a different light, right? And a different picture. Or Gandhi is not exactly macho looking,
No.
Right? But yes, because and people would say that's not, the picture of masculinity.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
of course, and that, I mean, he's a bit controversial, so he was
is.
also
in
some ways not so feminist.
Yeah.
But yes, so it's really not trying to do away, but we need to have more positive role models of what healthy masculinity looks like. And I've been looking for those. Right?
Yeah. So your next lecture should actually be on that.
Yeah, because once you say, "Oh, you cannot do this," then it's like, then do what?
Exactly. That's
right?
why I'm saying
that's why we need to show the positive.
Yeah, but we need to talk more about that too, because right now the toxic masculinity conversation seems to be talking about, as you said, right, such masculine norms that every boy and man and even women, right, just kind of expect of boys and men. So my analogy can a fish see water, because how can they see that this is actually not healthy, that these are actually toxic behaviors. So I guess the way to counter that is to show what are healthy behaviors. As boys, for boys and men.
Yeah. There is one other aspect which is kind of interesting, which you find more in male cultures than in female cultures, which is that of dominance. So men will tell you about alpha males, about the need to really be respected, right? Respect for men is very important, and they have to excel, and they more so than women, they need to be like up there. If it's not,
are they not predisposed to this whole sort of competition?
Yes, they're very competitive. Yes,
and,
so sports is number one. If you're not good in sports, then maybe studies. But there is, and then if not that, then sexual conquest. Right, and because of this need to keep having to be dominant, top dog,
that one-upmanship,
and this is where it can become toxic. What was not toxic before, but when you have a group of men, and then people then start to circulate perhaps objectifying pictures of women, that is a show of masculinity. Because in a group of men, you need to somehow stand out, and so you do this, right?
Right.
And actually, maybe many of the men in the group do not really want to see this, but no one's going to actually say, "Please stop this." You will lose social capital. People will think like, "Hey, this is what men do." Right, so I think this is where it can become problematic, right? As a group, and this is one of the things that men as bystanders, they will have to think about. How do we try to make sure this doesn't happen so much?
Yeah, that's powerful. How do men as bystanders actually play a part in this?
Yes,
right, play a part in promoting healthy masculinity.
So all this rating of women, that's a show of like,
that's right.
masculinity, and it's like it's amongst themselves. Trying to be dominant, but it's also in relation to women. This sort of show of dominance,
power over. Yeah.
So this power over is, we should be thinking about empowering
or power with.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, so what's your key takeaway? What struck you most about the conversation that we just had?
So I really enjoyed listening to your story about your whole sort of, MD at 25 and what you were going through. I don't often hear those stories. And then this thing about, I would have said, no, I didn't feel any gender bias, but now thinking about that and thinking, no, actually, I did experience something that men wouldn't have. right, in my role as an MD at 25. Yeah, so I thought that was really refreshing.
For me, I think this conversation just confirms for me, right, that gender equality really is an ongoing effort, and it's really one we can't just do it, in sort of patches and sporadic groups. This really has to be a whole of society. And actually starting from the whole of family, as you and I talked about before we end this conversation, bring the role of the father, right, into this conversation, this intentional effort, right, to promote and to think about gender equality as a fundamental value of the family, of that family that he's actually part of.
Yeah.
And then actually, seeing all of that become part of the whole society's value as well. But starting from the family, for me, what you said earlier was just, I think it's a really important.
I'm beginning to realize more and more that gender equality is not really about, this is in the interest of women. It's in the interest of
family,
men,
and society,
and family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important thing to leave our listeners with, that is actually really not about women.
No, not just about women.
Not at all.
No.
Yeah. All right. So we try to provide some resources for you to check out should you want to find out more, or you want to step forward to support, or if you also need to seek help for what you're going through. This is not exhaustive by any means, but some of the links will also be on our show notes and social media posts. Of course, Corinna, representing Aware's Women's Care and Sexual Assault Center. It's one resource. There's, of course, the Singapore Council of Women's Organizations, SCWO. There's also Wings. Full disclosure, I was involved with Wings. So did Corinna, actually. We were both on the board at one time. So Wings is actually the only registered charity in Singapore that looks at women and aging. And there's PAVE. There's also Babes Pregnancy Crisis Support. There's also the PPIS, Singapore Muslim Women's Association. And there are many, many more out there. So be sure to check them out. And here, I would like to leave our invitation for you. How have your family history and traditions shaped the way you see the world and how you live your life?